So our topic for tonight is Alzheimer's disease. As most of you know, it's a degenerative brain disease, and it accounts for between 60 and 80% of cases of dementia. Patients with Alzheimer's disease develop difficulties with memory, language, problem solving, and other cognitive skills that affect a person's ability to perform everyday tasks. The hallmark pathologies of Alzheimer's are the progressive accumulation of beta amyloid protein that forms plaques outside of the neurons, and tau protein that creates twisted strands known as tangles inside the neurons. There are an estimated 5.7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's in 2018. This number is expected to escalate quite rapidly as the percentage of our population that's over 65 is growing. There are some genetic factors that can play a role in the onset of Alzheimer's disease. And one study found that 65% of patients with Alzheimer's had at least one copy of the ApoE4 gene. And there are now more than 20 genes that appear to affect the risk of Alzheimer's disease. We are so proud to have as our special guest tonight one of the most important figures in the functional medicine world, Dr. Aristo Vojdani. He has a PhD in immunology and microbiology, and he's published over 180 scientific papers. He's a true innovator, and he has developed all the tests offered by Cyrex Labs, and he's their chief scientific advisor. He also recently was awarded the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute's 2018 Lifetime Achievement Award for decades of providing reliable, cutting-edge clinical lab services that transform personalized care. PLMI is Dr. Bland's new organization, for those of you who don't know. So let's give a big hand to Dr. Vojdani.
Is it on? Yes?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben, for all the hard work and your passion to the field of functional medicine.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you again for every year to give me this honor. I think we got to the level that friendship that I can call you Uncle Ben.
So before we start with Alzheimer's disease, Dr. Vojdani would like to set the record straight, and he would like to make some comments about another functional medicine practitioner's perspective that lectins are bad. So, Dr. Vojdani, what do you think about the premise that eating any food with lectins is going to be harmful to our health?
Okay. Well, really, we go according to this book. The message of this book is you have to remove all lectins from your diet without any discrimination. You have to remove all lectins from your diet because lectins are bad. Do I agree with that statement or not? That's really the question. I absolutely disagree with that statement. I agree with 10% of that statement. And ask why 10%.
Why 10%?
Thank you. So, in the first 6 months of our life, there is a mechanism that we develop is going to be in place that our immune system is going to live in harmony with food that we consume and also with the microbiome in the gut. That's given. That's part of the gift that the immune system is giving to us. So far you are with me, right? But if something happened to the immune system, that balance, which depends on regulatory T cells, Treg cells, or more scientific CD4, CD25 positive cells. If that mechanism will break, meaning the oral tolerance breaks, we react to that food and we make antibody against that. So what percentage of population react to lectins and agglutinins? About 10 to 14%. Depends on IgE or IgG or IgA and the type of the lectins. That the major ones are wheat germ agglutinin, which is one of the major lectins of the wheat, lentil lectins, soy lectins, pea lectins. Almost every vegetable, even potatoes, have some kind of lectins. But if we have good digestive enzymes, and also we have a good oral tolerance in place, and also if we cook the lectins very well, no harm is going to be done. So if you do a blood test and you make antibodies against some of these lectins, that's the only case I agree with removing that lectin or agglutinin from your diet. Is it clear? In other 90% of the cases, no harm is done.
And if you
Because you digest it. If you digest it and you convert the proteins to amino acids, those amino acids are going to be absorbed like any other source of amino acid. No harm is going to be done.
And if you want to find out if your patient reacts to lectins, you can run some of the Cyrex panels, like Array 3 and
Array 10, for example, if you pay attention, there are at least 10 different lectins and agglutinins on that panel. That was the idea from the first day when I developed that test.
so to start the discussion. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I have one question that I'd always wanted to ask, which is that is not mentioned by the other functional physician who says you should.
Could you hold the microphone closer to your mouth?
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's not working.
It's not on.
Okay,
Which-
I had one question,
microphone
and that
is
had
that?
to do with sprouting the lectin. Does sprouting the lectin mitigate the problems as you see it?
I don't know. I didn't do any research myself. When I talk and give an opinion, usually it's based on hands-on experiments. And believe me, I love to do experiments in the laboratory. Without that, I cannot breathe. So about 6 months ago, I took 500 blood samples of so-called healthy subjects, blood donors. And then I ran those bloods against 7 or 8 different lectins, and I found 10 to 12% are reacting to these lectins, and I'm in the process of writing that, and hopefully I'll publish it in the future. So, but I don't have any experience with sprouting. What happens to the structure of lectins if you do sprouting, I don't know.
Thank you.
So to start the discussion about Alzheimer's, I'd like to ask everybody in the audience, how many of you feel that if one of your parents has had Alzheimer's, that you are likely to have it, or that you're doomed to have it? How many, raise your hands, how many people feel that if one of your parents have Alzheimer's, you are doomed to have it?
My mom just died 3 years ago from it.
Okay. So we only have one hand.
That's congratulations, because only 1%. We had some kind of bet together, right? You know, I said half of the room is going to say I'm going to have it. He said no. This is the functional medicine. Yeah. So can you tell us why you think that you are going to have it?
Because of my gene, it was my mother and my genes pool.
How old was she?
She was 85, but she got it very fast. She got it when she was 82, and she was gone when she was 85. And she passed in 2016.
Do you think that's genetic?
I'm assuming...
Was she at least homozygote for ApoE4? Do you know any?
Let me tell you, I don't know. She got married. She went and eloped when she was 82. And once, I know it sounds crazy. Good for her. And she was a lush with my stepfather. And I think that's what contributed, because see, I'm cleaner than whistle. I don't drink, I don't smoke, all that.
It's the marriage that.
Yeah, and it was so weird is that he got Alzheimer's too.
Thank you. So because
It was Alzheimer's.
I have a collection of beautiful slides would like to share with you. Is it okay to start with the slides?
Absolutely.
What I will do, because our intention was not to put any slides, but because I have such a set of 220 different slides about Alzheimer's
Oh my God, that's
that I'm going to share with you tonight. No, 60 of them, okay? This is a lecture next week I'm going to give in Florida, but very fast. I would like to go through the slides by about 30 minutes, so we'll have 30 minutes for question and answer. So please hold on to your questions, okay? So let's go. Listen, can you do that? Yeah. In fact, I can stand here by you. Yes. So those are the objectives. Let's go to the next. So Alzheimer's is the most common form of age-related dementia, and all of that you know. Ben gave the introduction. Let's go. Next. Okay. This slide is very important. Why? In the US, we have 5.7 million. 5.7 million. Now, that's the correct statistic. In the world, 47 million. If you do calculation of the world population versus American population and the number of Alzheimer's, in America, we have threefold higher of Alzheimer's disease. 1 in 58 in America versus 1 in 160 in the world. And ask why. Okay? We have some answers, and also we don't have some answers. Let's go. Okay, wait. This is again, you'll see. So there are some cases of Alzheimer's, almost 100% genetics. And this is this side. 300,000 out of 5.7 million. There are a series of genes and mutations that if you are part of that, no matter what, that's called early Alzheimer's. You get it at 30, 40, 50, 60, but not after 65. You got it? Okay, so genetic is involved in 300,000. Almost non-genetic is on this part, 5.4 million. There is small portion of 5% of this, if they have ApoE homozygote, there is more probability of getting Alzheimer's. It's not 100% like this one. For example, in Nigeria, the percent ApoE, double ApoE, is very high, but they don't have almost any Alzheimer's. So you will see that later on. I will talk about the window of opportunity for intervention. That window of opportunity for intervention exists, and that's between 20 to 30 years. That's why all this testing that I came out with is about window of opportunity for intervention. This is not for diagnosing, it's helping to diagnose Alzheimer's, but really it's for early detection and prevention. That's really overall message of Cyrex. Let's go. And here the percent actually, E44, it's only 2% of the population. So there is some genetic component in that part. Okay, now I already, again, talked about this, that you see that ApoE in certain part of the world they have it and there is no. So the idea is right here that the issue of exposomes, this is what we talked at PLMI about, the exposomes. If you get exposed to good stuff, that will prevent Alzheimer's disease. Good nutrition, good diet, lifestyle, and all of that. So there is a message of hope in here. But if you get exposed to all kind of toxic chemicals and you are depressed and all kind of factors, then that can affect gene expression to the positive or to the negative. So we can change genetic expression by the environmental factors. So again, genes, genetic susceptibility, environmental triggers, toxic chemicals, food, pathogens, and then you'll see this part, the blood-brain barriers plays the most important role. Because my message tonight is, yes, you do Cyrex testing and you find all these antibodies. As long as the blood-brain barriers are perfect, those antibodies do not penetrate and do not damage your brain. But if you have blood-brain barrier compromise, it's going to affect your brain function. And after a few years may result in Alzheimer's disease. So overall, genes playing much lesser role than what we believed before. And again, I'm pleased, with your not raising your hand. Okay, so here are some of the factors that contribute to amyloid plaque formation. So tau, when it becomes phosphorylated, amyloid beta peptide, you'll see alpha-synuclein, gram-negative bacteria, bacterial toxins, herpes viruses, spirochetes, chlamydia, oral pathogens, all kind of antibodies, immune complexes, cytokines, pro-inflammatories like TNF-alpha, and autoreactive lymphocytes, apoptotic cells, all of these together, if some of these will manage to go to the brain, this will be the results, which has been mentioned in this introduction. That's the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, which is the amyloid plaque. So now, just watch a little bit. Those are the growth factors. Beta-NGF, BDNF, neurotrophins, everything. So when everything is fine, you see the garden looks beautiful. Next. That's why I wanted to show you my slides. Right? Now look at that. Parasites, molds, yeast, LPS, mercury, formaldehyde, aluminum, all kind of antibodies, food antibodies, amyloid beta antibodies, growth factor antibodies, inflammatories, all that. Look what happened to the beautiful garden. This is really excellent analogy to what's happening in the brain, but this takes 20 or more years. That's why there is window of opportunity for intervention. Also, there are 7 steps in Alzheimer's disease. We don't sleep at night and wake up in the morning having Alzheimer's. So these are the 7 steps. Up to this point, probably there is no symptomatology. After this, there are symptomatology. So my message again tonight is detect Alzheimer's at these 3 early stages as possible, and that's where laboratory testing, blood tests are going to help. So again, that's exactly what you're summarizing that. This is what Dr. Bredesen says. We have to get to the cause of cognitive decline and fix any imbalances before the situation becomes irreversible. when the situation becomes irreversible, unfortunately, there's not much you can do about it. Okay, so there are 7 groups of proteins or antibodies we are testing. It's just very fast. The first groups are proteins involved in amyloidogenesis, causing all of this. So we measure antibody against those. Okay, just example of tau. Think about, let's say Ben, who is taking the trash? Trash day is every, Tuesday, Wednesday in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
You don't know, so your wife is doing
No,
it.
I take it. No, it's Friday.
Okay. So if you are taking it, you are tau. The job of tau is actually to take all these garbage and get rid of it. Of course, with the garbage man. That's exactly what tau is doing. And the garbage actually from, it's from cucumber, from fruits, from this, from that. But what will happen if you will not take your garbage out for a year? What will happen in your house? Just think about it. That's when tau is inactive. When we make antibodies against tau, that's exactly what happens. Okay? Now the growth factors. Remember this, right? The growth factors are the nutrients for the garden. If you make antibody against every one of these, what will happen? The garden will not flourish anymore. Let's go. And this is something that connects the gut to the brain. The enteric nerve, vasoactive intestinal peptides, some transglutaminases, including meat glue, or microbial transglutaminase, cross-react with amyloid beta. You make antibody against these, that reacts with amyloid beta. Oral pathogens, then Enterococcus, E. coli, Campylobacter jejuni, herpes type 1, all of those being proven to play a significant role in Alzheimer's disease, but our findings at Cyrex, it's about mainly, we added this part. The cytolethal distending toxins, the first time that we discovered and we published that in the journals. Next. Toxic chemicals. Look at this. And the worst of all is aluminum. Food that cross-react with amyloid beta. These are the major ones. Wheat proteins. So when Dr. Bredesen put his patients on gluten-free diet and dairy-free diet, that's why he was successful. We showed that these foods cross-react with amyloid beta, the antibody. And egg yolk, not egg white. Lentil and pea lectins. Canned tuna, the raw tuna was only, let's say, 20% positive.
Do you want to take the question now, Doc, or
Yeah.
do you want to hold it? I think
Why canned tuna? You can tell me. I know you guys are so
wants you to
smart.
hold the question.
Why canned tuna is so positive, but pure tuna was not that positive? Yeah, the can, aluminum, and the plastic. Combination of all three together, synergistic effect.
Cans are lying.
And then
Cans lying.
hazelnut, cashew, scallops, squid, those were all cross-reactive. Next. And then finally, this number 7, these are the 7 groups of antibodies that we are going to test. And so blood-brain barrier protein, claudin 5, aquaporins, and neurofilament proteins. These are all part of, by the way, last night probably you heard news all over the, in the news about the new test discovered by the scientists in Germany for Alzheimer's disease. They test only these neurofilaments directly in the blood. So we have 30 of these biomarkers that we are testing. Okay, so now let's go to the scientific findings very fast. Okay, go. the article, some of you have a copy of this, that just the title, okay, I'm not going to, anti-amyloid beta. Prevalent, you may contribute to intraneuronal deposition of A-beta 42. So if you have antibody, you make antibody against food or against canned tuna. That antibody gets to the brain, can aggregates, cause aggregation or fibril formation, changing amyloid beta to become sticky and then becomes amyloid plaque. So what did we find? So this is the antibody against amyloid beta itself. So this is 100%. This is the negative control. But it reacted with amyloid beta protein. You remember Mr. Tau? It reacts with tau also. It reacts with alpha-synuclein, involved also in Parkinson's, presenilin. Look at that, almost 90%. Then rabaptin, the same thing, S100. These are all blood-brain barriers. And this is also fibrillary acidic protein. So it reacts with many other brain proteins. So one antibody reacts against many other proteins, which are all involved in Alzheimer's disease. Now the growth factors. This is anti-amyloid beta, reacts with beta NGF, the growth factors, BDNF, and enteric nerve. That's one of the most important findings also. The enteric nerve plays a role in Alzheimer's disease. We don't think about that. And finally, please pay attention to meat glue or microbial transglutaminase. And it's everywhere in the food. So as a practitioner, you have to ask the patients what kind of products they're using. If the microbial transglutaminase is used, I think should be removed from the diet of all patients who are candidates for Alzheimer's in the future.
The significance is that the enteric nervous system is connected to the central nervous system.
Yes, yes, thank you. Next. So now regarding the pathogens. This is the history of involvement of pathogens in Alzheimer's disease. Started with 1980 with Ruth Itzhaki. She's in London, but she's an Israeli scientist. And they told her she was crazy. And the same thing, all the way until probably only a year or 2 years ago, some started accepting the pathogen theory of Alzheimer's disease. So, thanks to this study by Dr. Zahn at UC Davis, who took brain of Alzheimer's patients and stained them with specific antibodies, and what he found actually that the E. coli in the brain of Alzheimer's patients, the gut bacteria in the brain of Alzheimer's patients. Not only that, he found also the lipopolysaccharide, the endotoxin. And here the picture, okay? So E. coli, this is the control, but this is the Alzheimer's patient. It seems that controls, they have small amount of E. coli and LPS in the brain. Why do we have that? I don't know. Maybe it's for challenging the immune system in the brain. But too much of it, of course, is going to contribute to amyloidogenesis. The second article. Reaction of amyloid beta antibody with different infectious agents involved in Alzheimer's disease. So here we show that confirming those findings, again, anti-amyloid beta reacts with E. coli. with E. coli LPS. So far, that's what's discovered, right, by Dr. Zad. But this is our findings. Cytolethal distilling toxin. Dr. Pimentel claims that's only for SIBO. But believe me, if a patient is having SIBO and releasing those toxins by the bacteria in the gut, that person is candidate for Alzheimer's in the future. I'm not sure if he knows about this, but I promise to be here to ask him that question.
And if they have leaky gut, they most likely have leaky brain, right?
Yes. And look at Campylobacter jejuni that he claims that is responsible for SIBO and IBS. Now I'm saying that that toxin is responsible for Alzheimer's in some individuals. So taking care of the gut always is the most important. That's conclusion of the study. Go. Now, oral pathogens, again, you see S. sanguinis, S. mutans, but Enterococcus, what is Enterococcus? Another bacteria in the gut. So the gut bacteria are the most reactive. Candida albicans, Giardia, even Borrelia burgdorferi, about 20-30% reactivity.
That's Lyme
Compared to the
disease.
control is very significant. So the infections indeed playing a role in Alzheimer's disease, and we confirm that. Yes. Now, some hidden messages in here. Okay, West Nile virus, rubella, HSV1 already confirmed, EBV, early antigen. Now look at this, influenza, rabies, HPV. I'm not going to ask you about those two. What do you think? So the way we put it, in order to not get in trouble with politicians in science, we say every time you get flu, you are going to be at risk of Alzheimer's. Not to be vaccinated. Every time you get flu, you will be at risk of Alzheimer's disease. Okay. Continue. The third article is about food and chemicals. That's the article. Go ahead, please. And here, aluminum, HSA, compared to this is our 100% problem, that's about 20-30%. Dinitrophenol, mercury, but look at plasticizer, phthalates. So please remove all these chemicals from the environment of your patients. If your mother had Alzheimer's, I promise you, if you do all of that, you may reverse the course of Alzheimer's disease. Continue. So some foods additive that contain aluminum, all of that, including ice cream, cake powder, all of that. So cocoa, pickles. Okay, so you see this on a daily basis, right? Okay, where is the evidence, right? Where is the evidence? This journal called Mucosal Immunology. You guys don't read that. I read that. Why originally they added aluminum to the food? The idea was aluminum is in and it's out. And the article is telling us that 40%, right there, of aluminum gets into the epithelial cells. So are you surprised that we have so many Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, and name it?
Especially in the age of aluminum, where aluminum's everywhere.
So 40% goes to the epithelial cells. Then there is ample evidence that, in fact, they call aluminum neurotoxic. You are more than welcome to go online and search for aluminum being a neurotoxic. You will find many articles. So here, a link between aluminum and pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease. That's international Alzheimer's disease. Next. This is, look at the title, co-localization of aluminum and iron in nuclei of nerve cells in brain of patient with Alzheimer's disease. The next, you'll see the picture. So here, the red is aluminum inside the nucleus of neurons in Alzheimer's patients. How, I don't know really, those who are involved in decision making can see all of these and they do not remove it from our food. Next. Now, this is plastic production. So plastic was one of the major components, but you see, instead of reducing it, we are increasing it every year. Now, in relation to food, continue, please. Okay, what foods? You can see right here, the colorful one, right? Egg white, a little bit egg yolk, seaweed, pea protein, pea lectin, lentil lectin. Okay, now raw tuna versus canned tuna. Then hazelnut, squid, cow's milk, and beta-casein. And then different components of wheat, including the water-soluble components as well as gluten. So these foods are playing a significant role in Alzheimer's, but again, my opinion is very similar to lectins. If you do not digest them, and your oral tolerance is broken against this, and you make antibody against them, and if those antibodies will cross your barriers, it's going to enhance the Alzheimer's cascade or development. Next. So that's why the breach in blood-brain barrier is so important. So let's learn a little bit about blood-brain barriers. What are blood-brain barriers? Really are some of these small blood vessels protecting the brain from entry of unwanted molecules other than nutrients. So, which type of cells are protecting? The astrocytes. And astrocytes, they have these, the astrocytic foods that, you know, they're very sticky, sitting there and protecting the barriers. So any damage to astrocytes is going to open the blood-brain barriers. Next. So just look at these few slides, which again I enjoy to see because there's a gentleman in our laboratory that helps me to put that together, and Vincent knows his friend with Joel, and so I appreciate all of that help that he does. So first, what do you see in here? There is a layer that's protecting the brain. That's a kind of membrane-like. Then the next one, I call them the astrocytic soldiers. You know, these feet. They are, you know, sitting like that and protecting. Nothing can go through that. Now, if patients makes antibodies, all these ninjas, all kind of antibodies can break the barriers and then can get into the brain, what will be the results? Now, inflammation and the fire is in the brain. That's what happened in the case of Alzheimer's disease. Blood-brain barrier breakdown. And in some of us, unfortunately, during aging, if we are malnourished, we don't exercise, if we are stressed, all of that can break down the blood-brain barriers. Next. Now, so
Your computer turned off.
because it is not connected probably.
Is it plugged in?
So the next 3 or 4 slides by a scientist by the name of Nagel. Actually, the title of those 2-3 articles is this, that as long as we have antibodies, do not cross the barriers, we are okay. When the blood-brain barriers break down, then those antibodies can penetrate and then initiating pathology, which after a few years becomes like Alzheimer's. I think if you can fix it. Yeah. So get ready for questions because I'm done almost.
Sorry,
Okay, so
it's overheated.
okay. I can take one question until you will. Yes, please.
So in the beginning, when you were talking about foods that are cross-reactive, you
Oh,
said
can we
milk.
bring her the microphone?
It's not working.
Oh, it's not working?
Okay, take mine.
I can hear.
No.
No? Okay.
Speak loud.
So in the beginning, you were talking about the foods that were cross-reactive, and you mentioned milk. I'm assuming you mean pasteurized cow milk. I'm wondering, have you done any testing with raw cow milk or else with goat milk?
Yes, if you pick a package that we have with Cyrex, with Immunosciences Lab, there is just the abstract of the article that I published in Journal of Dairy Research. The message in that article is immunologically, remember, immunologically, it doesn't matter what kind of milk you are talking about. Is it A1, A2, organic? I took all of that.
But raw, unpasteurized.
Raw, everything, it doesn't matter. Casein is casein. If you react to casein, no matter what, goats, sheep, cows, 1 second. The only one, casein, is completely different. And we got less immune reaction. I'm not saying that we did not get any immune reaction with camel milk. Less immune reaction with camel milk. The only casein, which is different from cows and sheep and goats, camel milk, casein is different. But is it 100% safe? In fact, I took also plant-based, and in fact, they made us not to call it milk. The editor, I said, I'm not going to accept this article unless you change that to plant extracts. It's not, we cannot call almond milk. It's not milk. It's almond extract. So we took almond, soy, and coconut, all of that. Believe me, some people react to those also. That doesn't mean they are safe. So some people did not react to cow's milk, but they reacted to soy milk. So you have to be careful. But overall, the milks from mammalian milk, other than camel milk, their casein is 99.9% is the same. And from immunological point of view, if your oral tolerance is broken against casein, you are going to make antibody against that. Okay?
No, Dr. Reward.
Yes.
Why is there a difference between the canned tuna and the fresh tuna?
Why is there a difference between the canned tuna and the fresh tuna?
Okay. So first of all, what we learned that when we process food, it's not really from a structural point of view, it's not similar to the original food. In the process of canning, I don't know what they add, but at least we know there is aluminum can, and also there is plastic, phthalates and others. So therefore, if you add those 3 factors, we shouldn't be surprised.
But isn't it also the case that when you cook proteins and protein
Yes.
conformation changes. That was, I think, behind the question about raw cow milk versus pasteurized cow milk.
In the case of milk, didn't make any difference. But let's take peanuts. Raw peanuts versus roasted peanuts or almonds. Some patients react to raw, but not to the roasted. Some people react to roasted, but not to the raw. I published that probably 8 years ago. And that's why Cyrix Array 10 is the only laboratory paying attention to the real world of food immune reactivity, meaning whatever you eat, we measure immune reactivity against that. If you eat, for example, raw, salmon, we measure antibody against raw salmon. But potatoes, no one is going to eat raw potatoes, right? So we have to measure antibody against cooked potatoes. And yes, some people may react to that.
For those of you who aren't aware, all the other companies that do food sensitivity testing use raw samples. So even when they do the skin testing, you're putting raw chicken on your back.
No thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that addition. Yes. The allergies. Really, you go to do allergy tests, skin testing for food. They are using all raw food because the manufacturers who provide these allergens, so-called FDA approved, they are using all raw food.
So how do you improve oral tolerance from 0 to 6 months?
How do you improve oral tolerance from 0 to 6 months?
Number one, Elroy is sitting here. He has that experience of having beautiful 4 months and a week or couple of weeks baby, right? So number one, 9 months of pregnancy is the most important part of the future life of the newborn. Those 9 months of pregnancy. If you want to have a good oral tolerance in place, that starts when the baby is in the womb. Mom's diet, lifestyle, exercise, everything plays a role in immune function of the baby. Okay. How you improve when the baby is born? Do not allow them to give Hep B in the hospital the first day. You can opt out. For all our 3 grandchildren, we worked with a pediatrician who was very helpful with all of these. From the first day, probiotics, vitamin D, and few drops of vitamin A. Why vitamin D and vitamin A from the first day? Because there are receptors on Treg cells or regulatory T cells, which are maintaining oral tolerance under surfaces. So you are, by giving vitamin D and a little bit of vitamin A, you are going to activate Treg cells and then to maintain excellent oral tolerance in place by doing that. So those who really vaccinate 10 times up to 6 months, all of that, they really are not going to help their children to develop a good oral tolerance.
How do you view the environmental exposure, for example, in all the body products that we use to phthalates?
The question is, what about the use of phthalates in personal care products?
I hate it. I'm against it. Well, it shouldn't be there. You guys shouldn't use it. You should teach your patients how to use it.
A lot of times it's not even listed. So if your ingredient has perfume or fragrance, it most likely has phthalates, but it's not required to be listed because it's considered an inert ingredient.
Yeah.
You see, I'm educating, you see? Is it? Yes.
So I've seen patients who have had severe illnesses that have caused brain inflammation on a
You said severe what?
illness
Illness.
that has caused brain inflammation, and I've seen them recover.
You mean like meningitis?
Yeah, meningitis, things that come like from tooth infections. I've seen them get all kinds of inflammation in the brain. I noticed that you didn't have a very high reaction to gingival bacteria, but I was kind of surprised.
So the question is, when you showed your slides, it didn't seem to have a strong reaction to gingival.
Okay, don't take me wrong. That not everything is about cross-reactivity. What I was showing was anything cross-reacts with amyloid beta can contribute to Alzheimer's more.
Right.
But that doesn't mean performance gingivalis can get through the nose to right to the brain
Right.
and cause inflammation without cross-reactivity.
In other words, if you have
Yeah.
the infectious organism, the pathogen, get directly into the brain, you don't have to have this
Right.
immune reaction because in the brain will automatically protect itself by laying down amyloid protein. What about the role of blood sugar in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's? We've heard Alzheimer's is being described as type 3 diabetes.
Thank you. So there is huge correlation between Alzheimer's and type 1 diabetes. I'm sorry, type 2 diabetes, not type 1. Why? Bacteria love sugar. All those bacteria, Enterobacter, E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella. In training, I'm a microbiologist first, then I became immunologist. So bacteria love sugar to grow. So if you have a sugar...
What else loves sugar? The brain.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. But if you have sugar of 200, 250, those bacteria are really going to have party. They release LPS, and what else? Bacterial cytolethal distending toxin, and then to the brain. No one probably explained it that way, but this is the way we look at it.
But isn't insulin resistance another factor?
That could be as well, yes.
Hi, thanks Ben. It's great to see everybody. Happy New Year. I just had a thought. It's not microbial, but can you speak to the effects of a traumatic brain injury and how that might affect
Yes.
the immune system?
So the question is, what is the effect of a traumatic brain injury on the occurrence of Alzheimer's? And it's definitely correlated.
Very simple. Opening blood-brain barriers. That is part of my 250 slides. If one day we'll have time, I'll present it to you. But simple is opening blood-brain barriers. Every time, football players, other sports, accidents,
Typically, after a
any traumatic, any
let's
trauma.
say somebody
Yeah.
has a mild concussion, hits their head, and you get this opening of the blood-brain
Blood-
barrier.
and-
Typically, how long does that heal itself? Does it seal itself? And if so,
Ben,
in how long a period of time?
Believe me, unfortunately, I had this experience about a month and a half, 2 months ago, which I had an accident, and someone ran into my car, exactly the driver's side, and I felt, the BBB, the blood-brain barriers get open. For 3-4 days, really, I wasn't myself. Until I slowly I recovered by not going to bed and sleep, by walking, exercising. Don't give up. Why walking and exercise for Alzheimer's also? There's an article in Science, it published last year. You saw it.
Yeah.
Walking enhancing production of brain-derived neurotropic factors, other neurotropic factors. And remember the garden with all those good nutrients? Exercise and walking enhancing production of all of that.
Yeah, they did
So if you are stressed or had small accidents, you're upset, blood-brain barriers are open, the answer to that, get out and walk.
But how do we know if the blood-brain barrier is open? How do we know if there's increased permeability?
Okay, we do testing. There is a test that is part of Cyrex Array 20 is a test, but you saw also in my presentation we have more markers of blood-brain barriers, which in the future will let you know more about.
And you're preparing a new Cyrex array for the prevention of Alzheimer's, right?
We'll be in touch with you. It will be our avenue for communication. Yes.
When is that going to be available?
I don't know. I cannot tell you right now. Mr. President is sitting here, so he's smiling.
We'll make sure we communicate with you.
So,
Other than exercise, what are the scientific things to close the blood-brain barrier?
Can you repeat?
the question is, other than exercise, what else can we do to close the blood-brain barrier? What other factors, nutrients?
About 10 years ago, there was this article in Scientific American about ALS. And the famous guy with ALS,
Lou Gehrig.
Lou Gehrig. And in that article, they talked about two things. One was exercise and walking. Second one was resveratrol. But now, Ben has a list of probably 30, 40 different things can repair the blood-brain barriers. In Journal of Alzheimer's, they talk about ginkgo. This is Journal of Alzheimer's disease. Ginkgo biloba, curcumin, green tea, ginger, all of those, not only they're anti-inflammatory, also they repair the broken blood-brain barriers.
You know what? I'll post this article. There's some guy who has this website called Self-Hacked, and he does a pretty good job of listing scientific references, and he has a whole series of nutrients that there is some research that they're beneficial for closing the blood-brain barrier. Some of the first several are acetyl L-carnitine, which a lot of us recognize as a pain.
Glutathione, lipoic acid, but be careful with lipoic acid. Be careful with lipoic acid. Why? Because there is a chemical in cosmetics called actinoic acid. If you look at the structure of that, it's almost identical to lipoic acid. For some people, lipoic acid acts like a toxin.
Really?
Yes, so be careful with that.
Okay. Astragalus.
Yes.
So you astaxanthin.
Yeah, even don't forget DHA. 1 gram a day is the best for repairing the blood-brain barriers.
Vitamin D, fish oil, a lot of the things that we know are healthy for the brain already.
Is more better?
Is more of what better?
DHA.
Of fish oil, you mean? How much fish oil? Well,
There's some stuff out there that's like...
The question is, if you eat 100 grams of fish or 200 grams, what difference it makes? You get more fish oil. I think the body will take whatever it needs and the rest will disappear.
yeah, I know in my practice, we like to measure the omega-3 levels. You know, there's a lot of tests out there. You can look at omega-6 to 3 ratios.
What do
And
you shoot for? What do you recommend?
do you have a recommendation for omega-6 to 3 ratio?
Like 4 to 1?
Yeah, I usually shoot for 2 to 1. But I don't think there's a
There was
downside.
a question over there, right? One of you wanted.
Have you heard that there are some studies showing that certain kind of microcurrent neurofeedback is also beneficial in removing amyloid plaque or preventing the formation of
The question is, have you heard that, what was it, biofeedback and microcurrent might be
microcurrent
helpful?
neurofeedback.
Yeah, I guess in general, are there specific strategies to remove amyloid plaque?
Well, you know that they tried and tried and tried by injecting antibodies, anti-amyloid beta, the one that I use in my research. And even if they broke some of those plaques, still the patient did not feel better. That's why if you look at like this week's Scientific American, there is an article about Alzheimer's disease, no treatment so far.
But
Everything failed so far.
isn't the key to actually, I mean, so you have amyloid plaque, that's thought to be the end result of the inflammation.
Right.
It's the process itself. So I think the thrust would be to prevent the inflammation before you get to the amyloid plaque. If the amyloid plaque is probably going to stay there, just like with coronary disease, plaque usually doesn't go away. How we can prevent it further?
Very well said. Yes.
Yeah, so Dr. Elkin said that the amyloid plaque, similar to cholesterol, is kind of an end-stage reaction to inflammation. You know, if you really want to prevent it, you got to get to the inflammation ahead of time. The plaque is like a marker. But I guess another way to look at it too is potentially, maybe, if you could remove the plaque and then you could cause the neurons to heal, you know, maybe you could reverse it. But just removing the plaque alone is not enough.
Right.
Right.
Could you speak to the importance of microvessels, the capillaries, and the role they play in the BBB?
The question is, what can you talk about the role of the micro vessel, the small blood vessels, and the role they play in the blood-brain barrier?
Actually, those are the blood-brain barriers.
So, in terms of like microcirculation and ways to address that,
Yeah.
do you find that different modalities that would do that?
I think just, you know, it's common sense. Elroy, any want to add to that?
What are you thinking about in
It's
terms
common
of
sense.
ways
It's just a
to?
modality that I work with a lot of practitioners, and so we can't make
What
these.
modality is that?
Beamer therapy.
What is it called?
Beamer therapy.
Beamer therapy?
From Germany, it's been around 20 years, and so.
Oh, okay.
And so they use it in Europe to address disease conditions, but we're limited in the U.S., so I was just wondering.
Is this like PEMF you're talking
That's
about?
a carrier, but we have a different signal configuration that's a complex multi.
So some electrical device that helps to improve
Your
circulation
position on
to the brain.
How important you view the health of those capillaries.
I think would be very helpful. That's my opinion.
There's very good research going on at Cedars with Dr. Shaw, cardiologist, doing high-frequency ultrasound actually being catheter-directed to the microvessels in Alzheimer's patients. And there's another group on the East Coast also. And from a cellular perspective, it's healing leakiness of the microvessels and increasing vascular flow. So far, early preliminary studies by just using high-frequency ultrasound is showing very positive results.
That's healing the leakiness of the microvessels?
Yes.
So I also say something about that. There's someone in Florida, because he's interventional radiologist in training.
Yeah, there's a
Some they go in and try to clean the plaques.
No, so it's PK Shaw at Cedars and then a neurosurgeon in Florida both.
Is that a form of brachytherapy?
No.
No, it's totally different.
It's HIFU, high frequency ultrasound.
Can you say it again? I can't quite hear.
High frequency ultrasound, HIFU.
Oh, high frequency.
And it's done within the blood vessels.
It's catheter directed through the carotid artery into the blood vessels. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wonder if there's any work being done with stem cells to cause neurogenesis.
There are lots of claims out there that they can cure Alzheimer's with stem cells. Unfortunately, the field of stem cells suffers from lots of credibility or lack of credibility. Everybody is in every corner today. They open a place and say we do stem cell therapy. And again, as an immunologist, I have concern about rejection and all of that. What are the source of those stem cells? And I remember when President Reagan developed Parkinson's disease at the, I think, Barrow Institute in Phoenix area. He got, I think, stem cells from newborn. But when they looked at the cells, they were there only for 2 or 3 days. They were gone after that. And he didn't improve. He could not improve his clinical condition.
I want to bring up a topic. One of your slides, you showed a bunch of growth factors, which are important for the health of the brain. There's a controversy right now in the field of anti-aging. I went to the A4M conference in Vegas in December, and some of the doctors are talking about decreasing IGF-1, reducing growth factors as being a way to stimulate an anti-aging response. Particularly, the doctor at USC. Yeah, Dr. Volter Longo is saying that fasting or using his fasting mimicking diet reduces IGF-1 levels, and that's one of the important markers for anti-aging. On the other hand, for years, there have been a lot of other papers showing that increasing growth factors like IGF-1 is important to reverse aging because, cells break down and die and we don't regenerate. So what's your opinion about growth factors as having anti-aging effect?
I don't have much opinion about the low doses, but I was against high doses, which an anti-aging medicine they used to give. Because any hormones for me as an immunologist is going to cause cell growth and differentiation.
So
and cell growth and differentiation equals cancer. For men who get testosterone, there's a possibility of prostate cancer.
But the studies really haven't shown that.
There are some studies. There are some studies, believe me. So I don't know. To inject growth hormone or bring down the level of growth hormones. Dr. Cass is looking at me.
Probably it's something like too much or too little. And you don't want either one of those.
Yes, I agree. In my opinion, if my body can produce that growth hormone and get used by my brain and by my cells, that's the best thing. But if you inject it, that's not a good idea.
As we get older, the problem is releasing that growth hormone.
Yes.
Unlike testosterone and female hormones, we always produce growth hormone, but the problem as we get older is actually releasing it, which is why peptides are becoming a real big thing now.
Is there a way to enhance the release?
Peptides think so.
Are you familiar with peptides?
Yeah, whole torf.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, right.
Are you aware of the Buck Institute at UCLA has done a lot of research on Alzheimer's, and they actually talk about reversing Alzheimer's using a multiple nutritional approach. And what they say in their slide presentation, which I saw a couple weeks ago.
Who is doing this?
Dr. Bredesen.
Dr. Bredesen.
Oh,
from the
yeah,
Buck
of
Institute.
course.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
All of us are familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not there anymore.
No, yeah, it's a ray of hope because they have this little small cohort
Oh, yeah,
study
no, absolutely.
that showed 9 out of 10 Alzheimer's patients, cleared up, reversed actually their conditions.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr.
My study actually is supporting that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that he, for example, automatically removed gluten and dairy from the diet. He said it's bad for everybody.
Okay.
But I'm saying that now, yes, he's right because there is cross-reaction between those proteins with amyloid beta. And so it justifies to remove that from the diet
Sure.
and for prevention of Alzheimer's disease or reversal of Alzheimer's disease.
Because I'll tell you, like the same week that I saw that presentation a few years ago, the neighbor at my mother's house downstairs is a medical doctor with some late-stage Alzheimer's, and he's gone the medical route. And the nurses who take care of him showed me their presentation, their slide presentation, which never mentioned Dr. Bredesen or the Buck Institute, and tried the silver bullet approach, which is failing.
No, they don't believe it at all.
They're clueless.
No, I know.
Right.
We had a meeting a couple of years ago when the group was smaller, and I wanted to discuss Dr. Bredesen's protocol, and I couldn't get a hold of Dr. Bredesen, so I called up the Alzheimer's Center at UCLA, where he was at the time affiliated.
Yeah, right.
And the person in charge said, "We don't agree with anything that Dr. Bredesen said." So none of the neurologists are available to come to your meeting.
Wow, really? And at the same time,
which is why I spoke to Dr. Bredesen at the meeting, the IFM meeting, and told him that story, and he laughed about it, and that's why he had to leave UCLA. They were just so closed-minded. They're looking for that one drug that hits that one pathway that's going to be the answer. And as we know in functional medicine, the body's complicated, and there's not one pathway.
Right. The analogy that they used in this slide presentation was, it's like you have a leaky roof. You can't just plug one hole and expect it to happen.
30 holes.
You've got 30 holes. You got to plug them all, or most of them, and then the brain will heal up.
Right now. Go ahead.
Okay. You were talking about microvessels, and that made me think about niacin. Do you know if there's any work been done with niacin?
Is there a benefit to taking niacin for...
Maybe nicotinamide riboside is what you're talking about. A lot of people are using that. NAD. Yeah, so increasing NAD plus or NADH levels, which helps glutathione recirculation or recycling. There's a lot of studies.
It's talked a lot in the anti-aging circles.
There's questions about oral use actually getting into circulations or not. Some people are even using intranasal forms of it. It's called synapsin.
Plain old niacin would.
No, I think it's a derivative. Yeah, it wouldn't be
nicotinamide riboside.
Yeah.
A lot of us use it. I see good results with it.
Please.
What dosage do you use?
I'm using that's a good question. I'm used to 250. The animal studies
just 250.
Way higher than that. And I started using the intranasal forms of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you get better results with the intranasal?
I just started using it.
Okay.
Is there a brand of that?
It's called synapsin. It's prescription.
Wow, synapsin?
Synapsin.
Prescription.
Yeah, it's compounded. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't tell you synapsin, you just give the...
Yeah.
On that same,
That's just the brand name.
On that same topic, I would recommend the thorn resveratrol, which is LED with resveratrol. So it would go well to the brain.
I use that too.
Repeat it.
Repeat that. Okay.
She recommended a product from Thorn, even though we're sponsored by Metagenics tonight, that contains nicotinamide riboside along with resveratrol.
Nicotinamide riboside is all made by Chromadex in Europe. It's all being sourced from the same company. It's just different companies that license it. It doesn't make a difference where you get it from. But Thorn's product is good.
And Metagenics, of course.
They don't have it.
They don't have it. Well.
Thorn and Cytoplant, and then True, and then Elysium has made a whole business of just selling this one supplement.
Since we're on the anti-aging thing, have you looked into that form of astragalus? What is it, like astragalus A65, TA65?
So any questions or?
So if somebody has a leaky gut, they most likely have a leaky brain.
Fantastic question. I'll answer that based on studies that we did at Cyrex as well as at the Neurosciences Lab.
And just a follow-up to that is, if that's the case, if we fix the gut, will that fix the blood-brain barrier?
Fantastic. That will be the best question. So studies that we did, that we take like 500 patients and we measure antibodies against zonulin, occludin, ZO1, ZO2, all those tight junction proteins in the gut and in the brain. Almost in 70% of the cases, if patients make antibodies against tight junction proteins of the gut, making also antibodies against tight junctions of the blood-brain barriers. And mainly because from structural point of view, they're very similar. And so, if we treat the gut, I believe, sincerely believe, that also is going to help to repair the blood-brain barriers. Think just simply about this. If your patient is having leaky gut, what is she or he is producing? Lots of lipopolysaccharides and bacterial cytolethal distending toxins.
Well, think about the percentage of patients that have IBS with the cytolethal distending toxin. All those patients potentially.
So they have leaky gut. What happened to that toxin? It goes into the blood. What happens in the blood? Immune system reacts and produce what? Pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as IL-1 alpha, TNF alpha, IL-1 beta, IL-6, and many others. Now, the toxin itself, plus this pro-inflammatory cytokines, opening the blood-brain barriers. So if you stop production of those toxins in the gut, you are repairing the blood-brain barriers because you remove the triggers who break the blood-brain barriers. And so therefore, yes, patient with Alzheimer's and like many other patients should be treated first for leaky gut.
So the shocking answer for those in the functional medicine community is, when in doubt, fix the gut and that'll fix the other problems like the brain.
So one of the slides that we could not see, the last part is really detect, remove, and repair.
Right.
When we talk about repair, is gut and blood-brain barriers. I think with that, can we say good night? Yes? Or not more questions? Thank you.